I'm Tori, and I just want to welcome you guys to My Counselor Live. I'm so excited to be here today. And today I'm joined by one of our amazing counselors here at MyCounselor.Online. This is Tish Hedger. Tish is a licensed counselor. She knows all things sex therapy, marriage counseling, just so good at all of the relationship counseling, and just really speaks into a variety of different things. And Tish, I'm just so excited to kind of pick your brain and hear more about you. But I would love it if you could just maybe introduce yourself to the people watching who maybe haven't seen you before. I know that you have joined Josh on some My Counselor lives before, but if you could just introduce yourself to the viewers, let them get to know you, that would be awesome.
I love that. Tori, thanks for having me today. It's good to be here. And yes, my name is Tish Hedger. I'm the interim clinical director for My Counselor, and I have been seeing clients now for about 3 years here at the company, and I have loved being able to integrate my faith in with my clinical skills. That's been very fulfilling for me. And I love working with trauma, with couples, sex therapy. Really love to see God bring deeper meaning and fulfillment to life through healing of relationships. And so I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah. You always, it's so funny. I watch you and Josh when you guys go live together, and I'm not there. And I usually will go back and watch your videos because you two together can speak into so many different things and have two different perspectives, but like the same kind of goal, kind of thought in mind. And it's just so good. And I love it. And I just love watching you and Josh like bounce ideas off each other around, sex therapy and marriage counseling and all of that.
Thanks for sharing that, Tori. It's really fun. Yeah, it's really fun to kind of get to have a conversation. I wish we could actually see the people. I could see your faces and get to have that feedback loop of that engagement. And so I miss that aspect, but still love the opportunity to get to speak to the people out there in these really important topics.
Yeah, no, I think you just said this, like the conversation piece, first and foremost, like this is a conversation, like you and I are getting to just discuss things, and people asking questions and commenting along the way are, joining in the conversation, which is just so cool. It's such a different way to interact. And I feel like it's more necessary now in this year than ever before to be able to kind of interact virtually and in such a different way.
Yes, it's so true. It's the benefit of the online platform that we get to engage with you guys, and you're from all over the country and maybe even the world. And so that isn't lost on me, how special that is.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Tish, I'm super excited to just get to talk with you today. And I'm very thankful that you were really willing to give up your time today just to sit down with us and answer questions. So you guys, if you are just now hopping on, welcome to My Counselor Live. I'm Tori, and I am joined by Tish today to answer some of your questions that have been submitted in the past couple of weeks, whether that be on our Facebook or in, the form on our website, MyCounselor.Online/ask. But we just love getting to answer your question. And, there's usually not a question that we're going to toss to the side and say, no, we don't want to answer that. Your questions are valuable, and, you're basically sitting down with a counselor right now, and she's able to answer your questions. So don't be afraid to ask the questions and ask the hard questions and the things that you're struggling with, because we want to answer them. So, yeah. Bring them on. Yes, that's so right. But you guys, we have started a new format of My Counselor Live. Some of y'all know this, but we are starting to kind of go add a few more segments to our episodes. So instead of just doing Q&A the whole time, we're also adding in talking through some of the articles that our counselors have written, talking about some trending topics, things happening in the world right now. And it's just a really cool way to get to know each individual counselor, the things that they think, their perspectives, and just expertise. So it's such a cool way just to talk through a variety of things. But you are still welcome to ask questions along the way. And if we don't get to it today, please still ask it and we will answer it in a future video. So we're going to hop in right now to Tish's article. And Tish, you wrote this article quite a while ago. Is that right?
I believe so. It was 2 winters ago, I think.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to, talk through an article that was kind of around this issue, because I think it's really important to talk about, seasonal depression and these sorts of things, because this is kind of that time of year where the seasons shift, and it's beautiful and we love it. We love the leaves, we love the pumpkin spice lattes and all of that, but there's also this heavy cloud that can be over the season shift, and this heavy cloud that sometimes just sticks around until after winter. And I really want to just hear your heart around this and talk through it. So first of all, I just want to ask, this article is called 5 Tips for Coping with Seasonal Depression. Who did you write this article to?
Such a good question. I think I wrote it to myself. I've experienced seasonal depression in my own life. And I wrote it for my own friends that tell me about experiencing this. I wrote this for my clients, the ones I think of. I have their faces in my mind right now, where they either maybe deal with cyclical depression, but then the winter months bring on a deeper, kind of darker bout of depression. Or my clients who don't struggle with depression all throughout the year, and then all of a sudden the seasons change and they find themselves with a depressed mood, with feeling, having fogginess of mind, not having disrupted sleep, beginning to experience symptoms of depression. And so I have a lot. This is very common. A lot of people experience seasonal affective disorder, or more commonly known as seasonal depression. And so I think I just really wanted to, write an article that people could have really practical tips to be able to, put in their back pocket and use themselves, be able to share with a loved one who may be experiencing this.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I just love your vulnerability in sharing that you have struggled with seasonal depression. And, you're not alone in that. And anyone who's watching who maybe is struggling with that right now, or kind of bracing themselves for that, you're not alone in that. And I have also struggled with, seasonal depression, with year-round depression. And I would love to know, Tish, if you could speak into the difference between seasonal depression and year-round depression. Can you have both? I would just love if you could kind of expand on the two things, because I think, at least in my brain, I tend to kind of put them in two different spaces, but they're really the same thing, So I'd love it if you could just kind of expand on that.
Yes. So major depressive disorder, depression that tends to come on in very acute, deep bouts, or that's like one type of depression. Another type of depression is more cyclical depression, used to be referred to as dysthymia, and it is oftentimes less severe. And so people who have cyclical depression tend to be higher functioning, but it cycles constantly throughout the year. And then with seasonal depression, it is depression that comes on strictly with the season change and lifts when when spring kind of breaks. And so I did mention, someone having cyclical depression and then it deepening during the winter months, and that would still technically be their cyclical depression. But really good to know for everyone to know that it's so common for the winter months to bring on either depressive symptoms or worsen symptoms of depression that have been occurring already.
Yeah, why is it so common in the winter months? What is it about winter that brings on some feelings like this?
That's such a good question. You know, I think it's a combination. Depression is so impacted by so many different factors. And we know that a big factor of depression is, well, there's a physiological aspect, and there's also an emotional aspect, and a psychological aspect. The emotional, or I'm sorry, the physical aspect is very influenced by environment. And so it is a real thing that we need sun, and that the cloudy months, that there is real deficiency of like vitamin D. People are not outside as much, not being as active. And
That's
so
exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking vitamin D, I'm sure, has something to do with that too.
it really, and I didn't put it in the article, but it's actually a great like supplement to take, because almost all of us are deficient in the winter months of vitamin D, and it can impact just our overall physical, emotional, kind of mental well-being. And and then we know that, and I write this in the article, that physical activity is such a natural antidepressant. And so it relieves stress, it increases like chemicals that help us feel good, like dopamine in our bodies. And so in the winter months, especially in the climates that are cold, people aren't outside, people aren't walking their dog and riding their bike and going on walks as much. And so I think that has potential to really like take away the opportunity for stress relief that a lot of people get by doing recreational activities. And then I think there's social isolation. There's more social isolation in the
Yeah.
winter. There's not as much, it's harder to stay socially interconnected in the winter time. And I'm not exactly sure, that maybe there's some sociologists out there that would be able to speak to this, of why that is. But that's kind of my perspective, that I see that going on in my clients' lives, and in my personal life, my friendships and church. And
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think of my struggle with, my depression that is really year round, and how, kind of natural it is for me to isolate myself and to immediately just sort of retreat and not want to talk about it, not want to be vulnerable with people, just want to keep it to myself, want to hold it for myself, and how much more difficult that is in the winter when you aren't seeing people, and you really don't even have an opportunity to make the decision to like hide and keep it to yourself or not. You're just kind of isolated.
right. And that can be a big, kind of fuel in the tank of depression.
Mm.
I think that is the interconnectedness that we feel with other people is so tied to our well-being. There's a lot of research that comes out, that has come out, that not being connected with a strong support system is correlated with um, heart disease, with lots of physical ailments,
Mm.
and that our connectedness with others, God designed us for that. And so when we don't have that, it has impact on our well-being. But depression is, I have so much like compassion, like as you talk about this, Tori, because I think depression is so tricky.
Mm.
Because a symptom of depression is that you don't have energy, that you have a like depressed mood, right? Which feels like nobody wants to be around me. Like
Right.
I'm just going to bring negativity, or there's feelings of like lack of value or worthlessness, right? And it's like, I don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
Literally, the symptoms of depression create a pull towards isolation, like this underpull that's very hard to resist because of depression. And you feel so physically depleted because depression is so hard on your internal resources. And so sometimes it's like, I feel like I don't have anything left to give. right? It's like to reach out feels very hard, or to go to a social situation that is available to you can feel hard. Of like, I don't have that to give right now. So then that isolation becomes a reinforcer of the depression that's there, because the feeling of aloneness, the feeling of isolation is like the perfect environment for depression to be able to flourish. And so, oh man, it's very, very tricky. And
Right.
I think I would want the loved ones to know of people who have depression, of just when you don't have depression, it seems so simple. Like, just reach out.
Yeah.
Like, what's so hard about that? Or like, even like maybe feeling hurt or angry, like, why didn't you tell me you were suffering? Or why don't you talk about this?
Mm.
But that is a characteristic of depression, kind of with all of these symptoms. It makes it very, very difficult to feel connected with others. It's very sad.
Right. And that's one of the first tips that you give in your article for coping with seasonal depression is social connectedness, and how, vital that is to, I don't want to say getting out of the slump, but, letting someone in with you, and letting them like hold you in that place. And so what are some practical ways that you would advise someone who has either seasonal depression or major depression, whatever they're going through? What would you advise them to do in order to find that social connectedness and kind of, put themselves, where they need to be with other people?
Yeah, I mean, I would want to encourage that our feeling of connection is subjective,
Mm.
which means it is our sense of internal, like our connection with others internally. And so a lot of times, we have this vision of what being connected with others may look like. And usually it's like visions of this like extrovert who is always surrounded by people and who's always, going to all the things and not missing any of the events.
Not me. That's not me.
That isn't me either.
That is not how I socially connect. That socially depletes me.
Yes, yes. And so I think I've heard a lot talking about social connection with my clients of them saying, well, I'm an introvert. Almost like being an introvert means you don't need as much social connection. So I think I would just want to encourage people to give themselves permission to let it be what they need it to be.
Right.
So asking yourself, like, what makes me feel connected with others? What makes me feel connected to my tribe?
Mm.
And being able to, take some action steps to engage even when it feels hard. And so little action steps can have big payoff. And so, first I think to identify safe people in your life, right? That when you're going through this, you maybe want to focus on the few that you have deep trust with first. And I would encourage you just to let them know you're struggling. Just say, hey, I'm having a rough week. Would you pray for me? Or I just wanted you to know. I just needed to tell someone that I'm struggling this week. And that can be really hard. I don't know what kind of response you're having inside when you think about doing that, if you're struggling. But for me, in the times of my life, it can feel so hard to do that. So I think I would just encourage the people watching to really like, all you need is like 3 seconds of bravery.
Mm-hmm.
And to, to maybe send find ways to have fun, send a silly text. If there's a lot of my clients are like, well, I don't really have, deep friendships. I don't have those relationships established. And so then if you are working on the more outer concentric circles of relationships where there's not as much trust, to give yourself permission to engage at the level that you feel comfortable with. And, being able to serve in some aspect of your tribe that feels meaningful to you, a lot of times helps with our sense of interconnectedness, of knowing you have something to offer, knowing that you're important, knowing that you have value, that it matters, that you're here. and that it's felt when you're not, or when
Mm,
you're pulled away.
that's good. That's really, really good. And I think it's so hard because it's so vulnerable, and because it's not it's like someone is asking to be in your space. It's like you're inviting them into your space. You're asking them to come into your space, your headspace. Hey, I'm struggling, and that can be just very vulnerable and very scary. But I think that that's such a good word and just such great practical advice. And just, yeah, the reminder that like social connectedness doesn't have to look like we think that it should look. Sometimes it is just sending that text and saying, hey, I'm having a really hard day. I just wanted someone to know.
Yes, absolutely. It is. Yep. And giving yourself permission that if you don't feel ready to be that vulnerable, I encourage you to start with the concentric circles, right? Because sometimes starting with the inner circle can feel really intimidating. So starting with that, if you think of like the bullseye, the people that are a lot of trust is built with, and there's maybe a lot of, it feels safe to be vulnerable, and there's history there. And so if it feels like for whatever reason that's really intimidating, start with your coworkers, and just to reach out, like just human connection, even just a conversation, at work over lunch, instead of eating in your office, eat in the break room, can make a really big difference. So to not feel overwhelmed, like it has to be this real vulnerable gesture, if that feels too much for you, start wherever you are.
Yeah, yeah. So, other coping tips that you give, mindfulness. I hear the counselors talk about mindfulness all the time. Can you just give a brief overview of what mindfulness is?
Yes, mindfulness is bringing focused attention to the now. And there are a lot of ways to use mindfulness. And one particular way that's research has shown is very beneficial for neuroplasticity and just brain health and body health is more meditative mindfulness, where there is kind of some space that you create to be still and to be quiet and to allow your attention to be brought to the present. Our thoughts can take us all kinds of places, right? It can be a tumultuous, kind of chaotic place where we're thinking about our to-do list and that feels overwhelming, or we're worrying about that conversation we had earlier in the week, and it's like, oh, why did I say that, or why didn't I say this, or worrying about something that's coming up in the future. And God created we're very embodied. And so God created our bodies to only ever be able to be in this present moment right now. And it's like, if you slow down, it's like, okay, I'm here with Tori. I'm sitting in my chair, and letting yourself slow down, noticing your breath and the practice of mindfulness. There's a lot of apps I use the app Calm, CALM, and it has a lot of mindfulness sessions. You can just push play, and then you have someone kind of leading you through a mindfulness meditation. Or you can go on a walk and practice mindfulness, right? Where you are becoming mindful of, where are my thoughts and what am I thinking about? And bringing them back to the now, of just like being in this present moment. And I don't know if that just sounds like oversimplified, but for the people watching, to just try that and to just feel how things like inside.
Yeah.
And just slow down, and to not allow our mind and our thoughts and our worry and our ruminations or our regrets or our insecurities or our fears always to be setting the pace of our body inside. It's like, no wonder we're so tired.
Yeah.
No wonder our stress level is high, right? And so giving ourselves space to just be with ourselves and to be engaged and connected with this moment is very powerful. And to just encourage those watching that, like, that's where God is, that's where He meets us. He hems us in behind and before. And so he's like, the future, you're not there yet. The past, we can't go back, in your worry, but like right here in this moment, there's strength for you.
Mm.
And so.
Yeah, that's great. That's so good. And you mentioned just the tiredness that you can feel. In your article, you say that depression can cause this deficit of resources. Would you mind just like expanding on what that means? What is this deficit of resources?
Yes. Oh man, so if you think about your internal resources, and these are your mental, emotional, physical resources. You're finite, right? We're all finite. We have limited resources. And there are different things in life that withdraw and different things in life that deposit. And with depression, one, we know that the biggest correlator with depression is stress. And so stress is our body's reaction, to events around us that are overwhelming our bodies, that are overwhelming us, and then we're having literally a physiological response of pumping out stress chemicals into our bloodstream. Like it's a very embodied experience, and those deplete our physical resources. Right. So it's a little bit like your body is carrying a 150-pound backpack
Mm.
throughout your day. Like it's literally, you're exerting more energy, right? Whenever you're very stressed out just to do your daily functioning things.
Yeah, it's so heavy.
So heavy. You often don't sleep as well.
Mm.
Whenever there's, for example, when there's a lot of cortisol in your bloodstream because you have high stress, that impacts your sleep and you don't sleep as well and you have disruptive sleep patterns. And so then your physical resources are more depleted. You feel because you're tired and because your body is so tired and you're fatigued, it's hard to think clearly. So then work and life becomes harder to manage. It takes more effort to do the things that normally come easily. A lot of times, this is where feelings of inadequacy and feelings of failure come in. Like, what's wrong with me? It's kind of like we don't see that we're holding a 150-pound backpack. We're like, suck it up and walk as fast and run as fast. What's wrong with you?
Right. Well, and I also just think of, one of the symptoms of depression being, losing the joy that you had doing certain things. And well, when you're exhausted and you're trying to do something you enjoy doing, you're not going to enjoy it. You're exhausted. You're heavy.
It's so true, Tori. So then the input that we would normally get from things that we find pleasure in, the things that we do have a very friendly relationship with, no longer that it's like that relationship becomes ambivalent. And things that we enjoy, not only do they not replenish us the way that they normally do, but they also deplete us because it feels stressful. And so, so it's a very vicious cycle. And then you have the aspect of all of those contributing factors. Then again, back to the isolation, makes us, the natural human response is to want to withdraw when we feel that badly. And unless you've had a lot of experiences in your life where you felt a lot of safety of being very vulnerable and very broken and reaching out and that going well. But unfortunately, we live in a broken world. And so a lot of our tendency is to isolate whenever we're suffering. And that is like, so that makes depression particularly difficult, right? Because all the things you need to be able to battle depression are being depleted because of depression.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. I would love it if we could just kind of end the conversation on an encouraging note, because we know that there is always hope. And I'd love it if if you could give a word of encouragement, Tish, as a counselor to someone who is battling, because it is a battle, this seasonal depression.
Yeah, I would just want you to know that it's treatable. depression is treatable, and that, you know, the first thing you need is support. And so if you are wondering, I don't know if I have support, I don't know who to look to, then do reach out. I know in my own journey, a combination of antidepressants and my own counselor is what really helped me in my own depression. And that research shows that that combination is the most effective in treating depression. That the antidepressant often is helpful in mitigating the symptoms just a little bit so that the treatment can gain momentum. But if, even, a lot of people don't feel comfortable with antidepressants, and that's fine too, but the counselor is kind of the main thing. And then I would say that to have a lot of compassion for yourself. Depression is not your fault. You did not do this to yourself. You're suffering, and you deserve to be cared for.
Yeah, that is so good. Thank you, Tish. Yeah, I hope that was able to encourage somebody who might be watching right now and is or has struggled through this. I know it was an encouragement to me, so I appreciate you sharing your heart, Tish, and yeah, so good, so good. So guys, we're gonna just kind of jump into another segment of our My Counselor Live episode. We love getting to talk about some trending topics. So when I say trending topics, I kind of mean, what are people asking about? What are people searching for and interested in? And one thing that I'm super excited to talk with you about, Tish, is the feeling wheel. So sounds a little bit funny, almost sounds kind of, I think, game show. When I think like the feeling wheel, I just think of a game show. But I would love it if you, Tish, could just kind of explain what this is, this idea of a feeling wheel, and kind of the thought behind it.
Yes, the feeling wheel. If you're curious, just pull up Pinterest right now and type it in, and a whole bunch of examples will pop up on your screen. The feeling wheel is meant to be a visual aid of helping conceptualize emotion. And so feeling wheels start with like a center, and then they have concentric circles that go out, and in the center are what are considered core emotions, and then the outer circles are more nuanced, more kind of examples of that core emotion, right? So like if you think of I'm trying to think of a good one, like jealousy is often like it's fear is at the core.
Ooh, I'm thinking like Inside Out. Did you ever watch that movie? Because that's exactly what I'm thinking right now.
Inside Out was actually a children's cartoon about emotional intelligence.
Oh, totally. I cry every time that I watch it because it always is just like, oh my gosh, this is so deep for a 4-year-old, but wow.
Very, very deep. The writers did an excellent job. There's actually counselor trainings on how to use Inside Out as a tool in working with children in therapy.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not even kidding you.
That's my kind of therapy. I'm an adult and I'm down for that. I mean,
we're like, we'll sign up, please. We want that.
Okay, that's awesome. So there's core emotions, just like, the I guess there were 5 of them, I think, in the movie.
Yes. So in the movie, they represented with 5. In research, there's been a lot of research on what are the core emotions, and it's a little nuanced, but the 7 core emotions are fear, anger, sadness, disgust, joy, excitement, and sexual excitement. And so these are emotions that can be layered with other emotions, right? Like anger can really be a defensive emotion above a more vulnerable emotion like sadness or fear. But those are the core emotions that when you get down into core emotion, they aren't layered over anything else, but at the core of our being, that is just the honest experience that we're having of an event, of a situation. That's just our spontaneous, authentic experience. That emotions are just telling us the story about what we're experiencing. So they aren't good, they aren't bad, they just are. And they're really important information to listen to so that we can choose how we respond. And so, so the feeling wheel is really just a tool that gives a visual of a little bit. I tell my clients it's a little bit like if you're not sure what you're feeling, right? Because this is not a skill that we're born with, to know what we're feeling. And so to just take a list of emotions, take the feeling wheel, and just like kind of try them on. Like, okay, I know that I'm like activated. I know that I'm feeling something, but I don't know what. And so to kind of go and just like, okay, is it this? It's this. Okay, I think it's this. And it's really bringing, like, we experience our emotions in our body first. And a lot of times we're disconnected in our culture. We're totally disconnected from our bodies. But bringing our awareness of our experience and our emotional experience is very calming to our brain. Our brain really likes it. And so sometimes the best way to tame our emotional experience is to name it. So name it to tame it.
That's really, really good advice. So how do you do that though in the moment? You know, if in the moment I'm feeling really intense frustration because at my core I'm angry, how do you kind of like take a step back and pull yourself back in that moment to name it?
It's very hard. So it's like a muscle. And it's something that you practice and you get better at over time. And so I think the first step is retrospectively being like, what was that about? What was going on with me, right? This happens in my marriage, right?
Oh, totally. I was literally just thinking the amount of times that I have gotten upset with my husband over something super small and then come back later and been like, you know what? That wasn't the real reason I was upset.
Totally. Right, totally. And couples always say it's like our fights are always about the silliest thing. But when you get down to it, for whatever reason, this situation that is not a big deal in the scheme of life, it is pushing some really deep, important buttons, right? It's like, you might feel invalidated or not listened to. And when this is your person, this is someone that matters to you more than, anyone else, that has the potential to create some of the most powerful emotional responses inside of your body that you've ever had in your life.
Over something so silly, like usually. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, he didn't vacuum. Like,
Yes, but always underneath that is a deeper fear of some kind. Some type of fear or feeling of vulnerability, some threat of disconnection. And so being able to identify what am I feeling in the moment is it's like a muscle that you build. And so kind of you begin by, like what you're saying, it's like you've reflected of thinking, okay, what was that about for me? What was that? What was really going on in my heart? And then you are able to identify that. And then you go back to your husband and then you're able to explain that, share that with him vulnerably then. What you weren't able to share in the moment because you were too in it. And so that's the first kind of, reps that you're taking in building your muscle. And then the second step is noticing just when you're activated, just noticing when you're escalated, and being able to make that explicit in your mind, knowing, okay, my body is really upset. I say my body because you're literally having a physical response. And
right, like you tense up or something like that.
yes. And I'll just very briefly go into what's happening in your body. So if you think about, like, this is your spinal cord, this is your brain stem. This is your limbic brain or midbrain. It houses your emotions and your attachment system, your bonding system, and your like fight or flight. And then you have the frontal cortex that's over top, and it organizes and integrates all of them working together. So if
Amazing. I'm already like, oh, wow.
yes,
So good.
this is the hand model, and it is not Dan Siegel is the one who teaches it like this. And so whenever this part, your attachment system and your emotions get activated, think about like it getting agitated, and it's like fingers on the side of the cliff. It starts to be able not to be able to hold on. And then if this gets agitated enough, you flip your lid and parts of your brain literally stop behaving, right? Which is why you're like, why would I say something so irrational or so illogical, or like, how could I, like, why did I act that way? Right? And it's literally because your lid is flipped, if you will, and you are just in reaction mode, fight or flight or freeze. And it's a very powerful response your body's having, because our brain does not discriminate between imminent physical danger and relational emotional danger. And so when you're talking about someone that means more to you than anyone else in the world, or even a close friend or family member, and it feels like there's a threat of disconnection, we could have the exact same body response, as if maybe even more severe than if we ran into, maybe not more severe, I don't know, like a bear on a hike or a mountain lion. It's like this very visceral response. And the literally your prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of your brain, is no longer online.
Wow.
Yeah, so even being able to pick up the feeling wheel when you're in that moment, can even focusing on something and kind of distracting yourself and pulling yourself from that emotional state could be helpful. But truly, the best thing is to just notice, okay, my body is in this state.
Mm,
No good communication is going to happen when my body is in this state.
right.
And or maybe you're by yourself and this is just something that's happening within you. And for you to know, okay, you need to give yourself a chance to calm down before you problem solve. Like a big part of the way you feel is because your body's so escalated.
Yeah, no, that's good. So the feeling wheel is, like you said, to name it and tame it.
Yes, exactly. So because you asked kind of how do we in the moment use the feeling wheel. And so being able to first retrospectively, second, being able to notice in the moment when you're escalated, and then being able to do things that will calm you down. Like literally, I will stop speaking to my husband, and like if I'm starting to get agitated, and I'll just like start deep breathing. I'll be like, I just need 1 minute, because I know my body is starting to escalate and I don't want that to happen, because then it's going to be a lot harder to regulate myself. So then it takes about 20 minutes if you're really agitated to calm back down. And then for those stress chemicals to kind of reach baseline again inside your body, then is a great time to bust out the feeling wheel and say, okay, what just happened? And let it be an aid in giving you language, right? Multiple choice rather than fill in the blank. So think of the feeling wheel as multiple choice for your experience, because you being able to name it, oh, I had this reaction to my husband because his comment, I was feeling this insecurity. I was feeling this powerful fear. It's like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I don't feel crazy.
Right. And then I think it's giving you the chance to kind of get to know yourself better. When you recognize that him saying this triggered this that maybe happened years and years and years ago, I think it gives you such an amazing chance to reflect and get to know yourself better, so that you can kind of like hold yourself together in the future when you feel it coming on. Oh, this is because of this.
Yes. And being able to get your needs met, right? Because your emotion is saying something really important. So if something happens with our husbands and an insecurity that is more of historical origin or whatever gets triggered in us, and we have this reactivity, that brings more isolation.
Mm.
Versus being able to, just like you're saying, like we're all in this process of growing in our awareness of ourselves, but kind of God's design for that is that we would invite God into that space, and we would invite our important others into that space so that we could be cared for, right? So that your husband could know enough about your heart that he could speak the reassurance that you need, right? And then it's like experiencing acceptance and empathy in that place of vulnerability brings healing. And it brings like a deep sense of connectedness with the other that actually helps us get our need met, that helps us, even that insecurity, begin to heal. And so emotions are so important. Emotions are the currency of connection and relationships. We can't even connect with each other without sharing our emotional experience with each other. And so
Yeah, that's good. And I love thinking of the feeling wheel as, being an aid to both yourself and to others, and to letting others in and letting others, know what you're struggling with and what you're feeling. And yeah, that's so good.
yes, good. So go and download a feeling wheel, put it on I'm not even joking with you. When I first found the feeling wheel, I literally like took a screenshot and kept it on my phone. And so they have all kinds of colorful ones on Pinterest. Lots of free downloads online. So, but it's great for kids too, helping give them language for how they feel in their experience. So
Awesome. So good. So good. Not a game show, but just as rewarding,
yeah, maybe even more rewarding.
Yes, awesome. So good. Thank you for sharing. With the time that we have left, we're going to answer a few of your questions. So, you guys, thank you for submitting questions throughout the week. And I'm just going to dive into a few of those and Tish, kind of get your insight. This is one question I think you will be really great at answering. As a marriage counselor and as a sex therapist. This person said, I am a marriage counselor and want to know more about how to teach couples how to enrich their sex life. What advice do you have for me?
Wow, what a good question. So this is a counselor asking how they can counsel couples in a way that enriches their sex life.
Yeah.
I love that. So the first thing I would say is to start a conversation, to ask the couple, how is your sex life going? How is intimacy going? And I think that is the starting block, even for couples in their relationship who wish to enrich their, to continue to grow. Like sexuality is a whole part of the way, like our beings that God has created us. And so we grow our whole lifespan in all of our areas, mentally, intellectually, emotionally. And so sexuality, it doesn't have to be any different. And so I think I would just encourage couples to start a conversation of, hey, how do you think our sex life is going? Like, how does our sexual intimacy feel for you? Like, what feels good about what that looks like in our marriage, or what are the things that are difficult for you? And really begin to just open up a conversation, I think is a huge part of even identifying what are the ways that we do want to grow? What are our goals? Like, what is our vision for what healthy sexuality is? And kind of what do we want? So I think having a conversation, I'm trying to think of, because I also want it to be applicable for just the people watching. And so not just to counselors. So in my mind, I'm kind of running. I think the other big thing is for couples to understand how bonding it is for men, that God created them physiologically to dump huge loads of the bonding hormone oxytocin into their body as a result of being able to sexually connect with their spouse. And so for wives to know if they experience their spouse having high desire and it's like, oh, it feels like he always, and sometimes it could be the woman that has the higher drive, like they just always want sex. I don't understand. And that can feel really depersonalizing. And so I think I would just want to encourage wives to know that that God created it to be very, very bonding for husbands, and to understand that. And then I would want husbands to know that God created feminine sexuality to desire sexual connectedness when there is oxytocin in their body already. And that comes from the emotional connectedness, the tenderness, and for couples to really invest in cultivating their friendship and time together, that there's even space for them to feel bonded, because that is going emotional, intellectual, spiritual bondedness is what is going to enhance the sexual life more than anything else. So I don't know. I feel like that was kind of all over the place, but
No. Do you have any specific resources that you would recommend to a counselor, to a marriage counselor, around the issue, or the just teaching couples how to enrich their sex life?
yes, I sure would. I would recommend Enjoy by the Pinners, and also The Married Guy's Guide to Sex by the Pinners. And I would also recommend Restoring the Pleasure by the Pinners. And so those are all great resources that they could refer to their client, and that also are excellent resources for the counselor to take in for him, for herself or himself as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do love the heart of this question, just, really wanting to enrich, their couples' sex lives, and really just encourage their couples. I think it's a great heart that it's coming from. And I just know that you are really passionate about this, Tish. So I appreciate you answering that one for me.
Yes, of course.
Yes, yeah. So I'm going to ask one more question before we kind of wrap things up. So this person asked, I want some feedback about having no sexual desires toward my husband since menopause, and I'm taking an depressant. Not sure what I should do.
Oh, man. Yes. So it is very a common side effect for antidepressant for the impact libido. And so just really practically, I would recommend the individual to talk to their doctor about trying an antidepressant that shows to have low sexual side effects. Wellbutrin is an example of this. And so I would be curious about kind of when the lower libido started, as far as the timing of starting the antidepressant, and just talking to their own doctor about this. Then I would say it's a really common, hormones are changing like crazy.
Yeah, and menopause.
Yeah, so I don't know where they are. Did she say she's going through menopause or since
She
menopause?
said she has been through it. So she said she has, struggled with her sex drive since going through menopause.
Okay. So after menopause, there are certain hormones in the body that are decreased that can cause a lower libido. And so I would, again, talk to your doctor and just to do a lab of like, where is the baseline of your hormones? And is there something else going on that needs to be medically addressed? And then I would say it's very common to have vaginal dryness after menopause and during menopause. And so that's a really common side effect. And I don't know if that is contributing to lack of desire, but that's something really common. And again, I would recommend her talk to her doctor, because they have like estrogen creams and all kinds of treatment that can help with that. So that would be like the medical side, troubleshooting that, because we're kind of teasing apart, trying to, address different aspects that could be impacting. And then I would just, kind of talk through what expectations are, that throughout the lifespan, it's very normal for what sexual connection looks like to adjust, to change. Like, like for example, certain positions, might be hard on your body, or it might be more difficult. Certain sexual activity that you had with your spouse when your body was younger, that there can be some grieving
Mm.
of sexuality looking different throughout the lifespan, and being able to make those things explicit, and being able to talk about that as a couple, and to be able to grieve those things. And that something really beautiful that can come from that is being able to create a new vision of what sexual connection can look like in this season of life. This is also common, if there's something medically going on that changes what sexual intimacy might look like, that there really can be grief. There really can be, feelings of maybe it can be, it can make the relationship very vulnerable for both people to experience fear or insecurity. So just to be able to talk about that, and grieve if there is loss, some changes, and to be able to educate yourself about what is normal. With Sex After 50, there's a great book called Celebration of Sex After 50. By Rosanau. It's on Amazon. You can get it. And it's a great book about, a Christian book about knowing what's normal, of what just the normal ways that our bodies function throughout our lifespan at that stage of life. And then also being able to give more detail of how to troubleshoot difficulties, and also really being able to cast a vision for that sex can be an incredible way of connection and intimacy throughout your entire lifespan. That it isn't, our culture has a very, very narrow view of what sexuality is, and of being able to broaden that and really understand God's design for sexuality in a covenant relationship throughout your entire life.
Yeah, that's good. And that's a great resource just to recommend, that she kind of look into. So yeah, appreciate the question. And guys, if you have tuned in this whole time, thanks for joining us, whether you're watching us live or watching the replay. We're so happy you're here. And if you thought of questions along the way that you'd like to ask one of our counselors, please comment, please inbox us, go to MyCounselor.Online/ask, and we will 100% ask it in a future My Counselor Live kind of session. So thank you guys so much for being a part of the live today. And thank you, Tish, so much just for sharing your heart. And I just love your passion for what you do. And I know that you have changed so many lives and spoken into so many individuals' marriages. And so I just appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about seasonal depression, about the feeling wheel and identifying those feelings, and just answering questions that were sent in by our viewers.
Oh, of course, Tori. Thanks for having me. It was so fun. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, awesome. We will see you guys next week for another episode of My Counselor Live.